So I've been chopping at the bit to ask, and I figured now I think it's the time to ask, and I know Joe's chopping at the bit. Obviously, you book a lot of shows, so I have to ask: is this where the Chris Jericho and Fozzy come to play?
All right, so Chris Jericho. All right, so now this Chris Jericho thing between him and I is, how do I say? Well, you have wrestler beef. And I kind of made a play at the wrestler beef angle with Chris Jericho. To start off with, I will say this. Chris Jericho is a very nice guy.
Yeah.
However, Chris Jericho does not have a sense of humor and cannot have his ego picked at. So, you guys don't know me very well, but if I get drinking, I'm a ball buster. And sometimes I can get pretty ruthless, hence the asshole shirts. So back, I'm not really sure how long ago it was, maybe 2012. So Brick by Brick was endorsed by Crank Amps. So Crank Amps got in touch with me and they said, hey, Chris Jericho's band is doing a show at BB King's in New York City. Could you go set them a back line up and, represent the brand and, introduce yourself? I said, absolutely. So me and my buddy who were Crank Amp representatives went down. We set up the back line, we were there. And that show was like a who's who of metal, really. And that was actually, I believe that show was the meeting that Anthrax had to get Joey Belladonna back in the band.
No shit.
Because they were all there and they were all in a room talking. And of course, I barge into the room and take a beer and leave while they're in that meeting. So anyway, so we're there, we're having fun, we're partying a little bit, and in comes Chris Jericho. So I go up to Chris Jericho and I introduce myself. Chris, how you doing? Mike Valente, Crank Amps. How you doing? He's like, thank you so much for setting up the back line. We're small chit chat, whatever. Now, mind you, I tossed back a few. We got a couple beers in us. So I asked him, I said, can I ask you something? He goes, what's that? I go, did you name your band after the bear from the Muppets? And he looked at me, he's like, no. And I'm like, you know what I'm talking about. Waka Waka Waka, that guy, the bear. He's like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, Fozzy Bear is? He said, no. So Eddie Trunk was there. I looked at Eddie Trunk and I go, who the fuck doesn't know who Fozzy Bear is? And Eddie Trunk looked at me like, oh, I'm not getting involved, and kind of walked away. And I was just like, well, whatever, Chris. I said, nice to meet you. I said, remember, Waka Waka Waka, right? So I walk away.
Twist the face!
So now this is a 6-part story, so I just got to warn you.
Okay.
So that was the first part. So second part, a couple months later, he's doing an album listening party at Ace of Clubs in New York City. Crank Amps calls me, hey, would you like to go to the listening party? Absolutely. I got a bunch of friends in New York City. I'll catch up with them. Yeah, we'll go down. So I went down. I got together with a couple of my New York buddies, and they met us there, and we're hanging out there. And again, drinks were flowing. Chris Jericho shows up.
Oh no!
Again, I introduced myself. I said, "Hey, Chris, Mike Valente, Crank Amps. Remember me from BB King's? I set your back line." Oh yeah, my friend Chris. And this is my friend SD, a loud, boisterous kind of guy. So he's kind of excited to meet him, and he's like, let me get your autograph and all this stuff. So, Chris was just like, all right, whatever. And he's being polite. He signed the autograph. And like I said, we were drinking. So my buddy was kind of a punisher and wouldn't leave him alone. And I couldn't break into the conversation and move him aside. So I finally got a break in the conversation, and Chris just looked exhausted from talking to him, right? So I said, I'm sorry about that, Chris. He goes, oh, no problem, man. And I just said, waka, waka, waka. And he just like kind of rolled his eyes. And I laughed. I said, you remember me, right? He goes, yeah, I remember you.
Hardy getting a great ovation coming out here tonight. Boom! And that lariat taking down the challenger.
Third part of the story. Now Fozzy gets booked in Albany. And I booked him at the club I was running at the time called Bogies. And I got Fozzy playing there. My friend, when he was in a wheelchair and he was all fucked up, was a real big Chris Jericho fan. And he's begging me, can I meet him? Can I meet him? Can I meet him? So I went to the tour manager. I said, listen, my friend's in a wheelchair. He really wants to meet Chris Jericho. Yada, yada. He goes, absolutely. After the show, you can introduce him to Chris and, he'll, whatever. I said, okay, cool. So the show goes on. The show didn't do very well because it was during the Hurricane Katrina at the time. So it was really shitty weather and not a lot of people were coming out, but there was just like maybe only a couple hundred people there. So whatever. At the end of the show, everybody's picking up and everything. And I go backstage and I go to Chris Jericho. Hey, Chris, how you doing? I go, I don't know if you remember me. Mike Valente. I used to work for Crank Amps. And he goes, oh, yeah. I go, hey, I said, I asked you about if you named the band after the bear and all. He goes, yeah, I remember you. And he kind of was like, I said, well, listen, I got a friend of mine. He got hit by a drunk driver. He's in a wheelchair. He's all fucked up. But, he really wants to. He goes, absolutely. So he comes out. So I introduce, I say, hey, John, this is Chris. Chris, this is John. So John shakes his hand. Now, the way this went down, it just looks so bad. So my friend's shaking his hand and he's looking at him and he goes, I just want to tell you, you're a terrible singer and you should have stayed at wrestling.
Oh,
and he
no.
wouldn't. And Chris Jericho looks at me and I was just like, I set him up. And I'm like, I didn't know my friend was going to say that. And I'm like, oh no. And I'm kind of laughing. And Chris was not laughing. He was fucking pissed.
Oh,
and he looked at
no.
me, and he couldn't let go of the guy. So he rips his hand away from my friend. He looks at me like he was going to say something. I just go, hey, waka, waka, waka. Right? That guy he stormed out of that place. He was so fucking pissed. So pissed.
Well, it's all about that Intercontinental title. Oh, no. And Jericho.
Right? Okay. Whatever. The tour manager's yelling at me. It's just like,
oh no, some of those guys are the worst.
I go, bro, I didn't know what he was gonna. And I'm trying to explain myself. I go, you know what? Fuck it. I don't even care. Here's your fucking money. Get the fuck out of the club. Whatever. It's all good. Bye. See you later.
You got the check going now.
Yeah. So
Joe, get some of those comments since Mike can't see them.
Yeah, where is it here? So they're saying it's getting better and better. Shay says, holy shit. Somebody said, oh my God, good old John C. Rest in peace. So yeah, he got him going now.
Yeah. So now,
I see what you're, I just tuned in for the Chris Jericho story.
So now part 4 of the story is,
go.
Fast forward another couple years. Now Fozzy is playing at Upstate Concert Hall, and I'm doing security. So they asked me to come in early because he's got a VIP meet and greet. Sure, no problem. So I go in early, right? And I walk through the door, and he's already signing autographs, and there's a table and, a line of people and whatever. So I'm like, okay, here I am, whatever. I'm setting my station up, and I'm looking. I sit down. I had a little bit of a sandwich that I'm eating, but I'm only like maybe 10, 15 feet away from Chris Jericho. And he's signing autographs and he's like smiling and all great and everything. And he looks at me and his face just went, ugh. It dropped.
Oh,
right? And I'm thinking to myself, I go, there's no way this dude remembered, right? So I'm just like sitting there eating, and his attitude changed and he was mad. And he ended up leaving. He ended up leaving a little early from the meet and greet. And the tour manager's like, all right, time's out. I'm sorry, time's up. he's got to get ready for the show. And I'm just like, oh, wow, this guy's a dick, you know? So I'm sitting there and I go to the tour manager. I go, hey, come here for a second. He goes, I said, is Chris in the back now? He goes, he's going to go get something to eat. And I said, well, do me a favor, please. I said, tell him that an old friend of his said waka, waka, waka. And the tour manager goes, what does that mean? I go, just tell him it's an inside joke. He's going to think it's hilarious. He goes, oh. So fast forward a couple hours, I'm wristbanding people at the door. I'm doing my job, and I see the tour manager walking by. I go, yo, buddy, yo. I go, yo, did you deliver my message? He goes, yeah. He's not impressed. I go, what do you mean? I'm laughing. He goes, yeah, I don't. He goes, you got me yelled at. I go, why? He goes, yeah. He said, fuck that guy. He goes, are you kidding me? And I'm like, oh. I said, oh, it's like that? Okay, whatever. So I finished my job, and while Fozzy was playing, I stood on the side of the stage, and every time he looked at me, I just screamed waka, waka, waka at him. I did it. He tried to get the other security guards to throw me out, and they're not, because I worked there. They're like, say. No. Oh. I'm just like, waka, 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 motherfucker. I'm just on the side. Just harassing them.
And Jeopardy does connect.
So, okay, so that's done. Next part of the story.
Oh, my God.
Oh, yeah, there's two more parts, and it just
gets... so great. I feel like I'm sorry to interrupt, I'm totally getting, like, the true Hollywood stories from Charlie Murphy vibe from this.
Well, I mean, you know, it's like, whatever. I'm going to capitalize on this. Yeah. I found a weak spot. I'm going for it. I don't care. Every time I see him, whatever. So next thing, now we're talking a couple, 2-3 years go by. Fozzy's supposed to play at Empire. Okay. So now they're scheduled. They're on the board. They're ready to go. 2 days before the show, he does a wrestling event at the MVP Arena in Albany. So I don't even know. I'm just like, I'm home, and my phone rings. And I answer the phone. It's my friend. He goes, and I'm like, yo, it's really hard to hear. He goes, yeah. He goes, I'm at the wrestling event at MVP. He goes, Chris Jericho's here. I go, all right. He goes, I got front row, and I'm trying my hardest to get his attention. He goes, I'll call you back. And I'm like, oh, no, this is not going to be good. So I get another phone call. My buddy got thrown out.
Oh.
And I'm like, what happened? He goes, well, Chris Jericho was like arm's length from me. He goes, I kept screaming, Mike Valenti's going to fuck you up. You better not play Empire. Mike Valenti's going to fuck you up. Waka, waka, waka. Screaming that at him. Him and his two drunk friends harassing Chris Jericho to the point that they didn't want him at the thing.
You're contagious, so Mike.
I go, oh, no. Oh, it gets better. So the next day, what happens? Chris cancels his show at Empire.
Oh, no.
He canceled the show and said that he had to get some surgery.
So let me get this straight. He canceled the show because of waka, waka, waka.
Hey, no, says he canceled the show because of a doctor's appointment or surgery or whatever. However, he kept wrestling. So, scheduled the show, but it was in Syracuse. He never came back to Albany. So, because I'm me, I just tell everybody he canceled because of me. And I made some comments, and I tagged him in all the comments. I go, you chicken shit, you're scared of me, all this stuff. I just amped it up. I'm like, you know what, fuck this guy. I don't care. I was just having fun with it, you know? But, so now the sixth part of this story is even funny, and it brings your buddy Drew Stone into it. So Drew Stone,
no.
Yeah. So Drew Stone calls me, and he goes, "Hey, I got to ask you, do you have a legitimate beef with Chris Jericho?" And I laughed. I said, "No, I don't think so." I said, I harass him. I fuck with him. You know, I'm a ball buster. The guy's got no sense of humor. I just, you know, I light him up, you know. But all the guy ever had to do was like, ha, 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 really funny, you know, whatever. You can bust my balls back. I can take it. It's just have fun with it. So he goes, all right, because if you have a legitimate beef with him, I won't put him on the show. I go, no, absolutely, put him on your show. I'm not going to get involved. I go, but can I call in? And Drew's like, no, absolutely not. I'm like, so I stalked the show. So of course Drew goes on air, and I went to log on with my personal account. I'm already blocked. So I'm like, motherfucker, you blocked me. I'm like, all right. So then I logged on to my Upstate Black and Blue account, and I just started waka waka waka, started typing all this stuff, and they blocked me. I got kicked out. So then I join in as brick by brick, start doing it all over again. Then I got a notice saying, if you continue, we're going to report you for bullying and all this stuff. The next day I called Drew. I go, yo, what the hell was all that shit? He goes, no, it wasn't me. It was somebody else doing that. I'm like, oh, whatever. So whatever. So then here we are. So that's my Chris Jericho story. But the fact of the matter is that guy knows who I am just because I say waka waka waka.
Downstairs for the game. Jericho trying to find out the pedigree. The pedigree. There's a
It's all over a stupid.
Hold on. Let me play the sound. Let me just play a sound effect here real quick. Sorry, play the sound effect. That deserves an applause. Everybody in the chat, I want to see the applause emojis.
It's just weird that he doesn't have a sense of humor after being in WWE for so long and being a heel and everything, and actually being the butt of a joke on live television most of the time. It's like you would think he'd be a little, desensitized to that type of stuff, especially with the silliness that is, the Muppets and shit. And on top of that, dude, if he did have a sense of humor, that he just missed a golden opportunity to go back to his wrestling persona and just be like, you just made the list,
But you know what? In his mind, he's probably like, fuck is this guy? And he probably just didn't want to acknowledge me. Whatever. It's just, I was just having fun. It was a jerk comment to begin with, but it was tongue in cheek. It wasn't, I don't know. I really didn't know where the hell the name
harmless.